good morning, good afternoon, and of course good evening from wherever in the world you may be. This video is something of a continuation from a prior topic based on televised agony uncles and the likes. In my previous video we discussed the ever-charming Jeremy Kyle, and in this video I'm going to be rock-hopping across the pond to our transatlantic cousins way out west. And we'll be discussing a man who's come under more fire from critics than that of even Jeremy Kyle, and that man is no other than Jerry Springer. There probably aren't many people who may not have heard of Springer, and why not? The Jerry Springer show's been going since way back in 1991, right up to 1997 it was owned by Multimedia Entertainment. Then from 97 to 98 the show was owned by Universal Television Enterprise. 98-2002 it was taken on board by Studios USA TV. Then it was Universal Domestic TV's turn for a run with the Springer Show until 2004 I believe it was. And from there until the present, NBC Universal Distribution seems rather smitten with keeping hold of the show. Why wouldn't they? With a career spanning 25 years, and with almost 4,000 episodes over the course of 25 seasons, and with Springer himself having a net worth of approximately $75 million, despite the fact a good portion of that worth comes from him being the 56th mayor, I think it is, of Cincinnati, it would seem like the show is worth holding on to. And that being said, behind every great show, you of course have to look at the presenter and what they bring to the table. So let us delve into the show's namesake and see what we can learn about from having a glance into the life of Jerry Springer himself. Well, Gerald Norman Springer was born on the 13th of February, unlucky for some, 1944. And I won't at all be surprised by the number of people that I'm sure it will come as a shock to know that Gerald Springer was in fact born right here in good old England. And where better than our very own crime-infested, busybody capital, London. And to top that further, he was actually born in Highgate Tube Station, whilst the station was acting as a bomb shelter from those naughty Germans in a little-known fiasco called World War II. So probably not what you call the easiest start in life, I'm sure, but that being said, we must keep in mind this would of course be in the beginnings for many children and newborns of this time. At least Mr. Springer made it through this dreadful time with his life. Springer's parents, Margaret and Richard, were Jewish refugees who managed to escape from Landsberg and Der, Worth, Germany. Unfortunately, with every good point to be made, there are always a few bad ones to make up for it. Jerry Springer's paternal grandmother, Marie Hallman, was left behind and sadly lost her life to gas poisoning at Kekmeno experimentation camp in Poland. If that wasn't bad enough, his maternal grandmother, Selma Springer, also died at the hospital based in the Theresienstadt concentration camp in the Czech Republic. Another loss in the family was that of Selma's brother Hermann Eccles, who was a well-respected doctor based in Berlin. He died at the Theresienstadt camp also. So a terrible start of affairs in regards to the tragic losses that Jerry would have had to face as he grew into a young man. No doubt this may have been made aware to him in his younger years growing up in London's Chandos Road, East Finchley, where his father worked as the owner of a shoe shop and his mother a bank clerk. I'm sure Springer's life wasn't too different to many children's his age at this period, just after the war. Britain was still very much in a stage of rebuilding, many of its destroyed streets, so on, homes, so maybe it's very little wonder that early in 1949, Springer immigrated with his parents to the US of A. They settled in Queens, charming, New York, and it was there that Springer, still at this point, being a very young laddie, went on to attend Forest Hills High School. From there he went on to Tulane University, where in 1965 he earned a bachelor's degree majoring in political science. Already doing well, why stop there? Springer then earned himself a JD degree from the Northwestern University 3 years later. By 1973, Springer was working for a law firm which generally did well, and he stayed in this line of work until 1985. So upon leaving the law firm, where he had worked for over a decade, he then went on to become a political campaign advisor to a man who, in my opinion, was one of two of the last truly honest men to come out of America's front of politics. That man was, of course, Robert F. Kennedy, who, like his older brother before him, lost his life. It was after that event that Springer went on to join Cincinnati law firm called Frost & Jacobs. Sounds like a bloody breakfast cereal to me. By 1970, Springer decided to run for Congress, but he was unsuccessful to unseat Republican Donald D. Clancy. Also at this time, Springer was an Army Reserve and was called to duty and sent to Fort Knox, based in Kentucky. After his discharge, Springer continued with his campaign, and this paid off by 1971 when he was elected to the Cincinnati City Council. But with politics often comes controversy, and indeed just 3 years after getting involved with the city council, Springer resigned after he had been found to have been fondling around with ladies of the night. Yes, based on the outcome of a raid on a brothel, it was uncovered that Springer, long before he became known for what he is today, would for many years be known as the city councillor who was caught paying for sex with checks. In April of that same year, Springer made a public confession followed by an apology which can still be viewed in full today. Whilst making his confession, his then wife, who naturally was heartbroken, couldn't stand the media circus and rushed out of the way of things. Springer himself was often very near to tears, it would seem. If all of this weren't bad enough, less than 24 hours later, Springer was requested to testify at the trial that was being held after findings were brought forward based on the raid at the Northern Kentucky Health Club. I myself was never aware that health clubs offered such exclusive service. Looks like I'm going to finally free that woman I've kept captive for the last decade. Just attend my local health club instead. Anyway, back to Springer. Yes, I've said quite a few things that were in favour of him and gave him some leeway with his rough childhood, but, well, it wouldn't be one of my type of videos, would it, if I wasn't to get into the nitty-gritty of things. So, he was in favour of giving evidence against the 3 men who were believed to be behind the illegal goings-on at the club, and of course with this, his own activities were made public. He admitted going twice to the club for sex, once in December of the previous year and again in January. Horny Springer also went on to identify a $50 check made out to a then 26-year-old Norma Jean Hall. Another woman, aged 21, Pamela Jean Knight, God, 21, getting younger, identified a $25 check Springer gave her in return for sexual relations. Well, at least she was cheaper than Norma. Naturally, this shocked many people based at the City Hall, especially because Springer was due to become mayor after the next election by agreement of council majority, and at just 30, Springer would have been the youngest mayor to have such responsibilities of a large city. Early into this scandal, Springer's fellow council members loyally stood by him and refused to accept his resignation, probably because half, if not all of those dirty, erect-crested politicians had dabbled in clamouring for the clam themselves. Most likely just hadn't been caught yet. Nevertheless, and probably no surprise, Springer was fighting to keep his seat at the city council. Despite his efforts, and the 8 council members had all changed their opinion against Springer, probably for their own well-being, and he was kicked out of office. Springer was in a situation where there wasn't much for him to do, with several Democratic Party leaders, along with support from a Republican prosecutor, threatening to take action against Springer if he didn't resign. So Springer kept his distance. One light at the end of the tunnel for Springer, and is often the outcome for most politicians who were often caught with their hands down somebody's pants. He went on to face no charges, surprise surprise, despite the evidence. Much of this was put down to Springer's ever-growing positive effects on young people, in particular through his devotion and ambition being involved in politics. He was, by all accounts, a very popular figure in his work. It's little wonder he had mayor, governor, and congressman potential in his future. In fact, many people of the time believed that one day he may have stood for president. Unfortunately for Springer, though, he didn't qualify, being born in England to a Jewish heritage who fled Nazi Germany, but this didn't hold him back. Just 3 years after he resigned, he was taking the oath of office as the city's mayor for the next year in a crowded council chambers. But just as things were starting to look up once again for Springer, the celebrations didn't last. Indeed, he tried for another good run, and although he felt much of the public was backing him, on May the 8th, council members voted unanimously to accept Springer's previous resignation. Well, not surprisingly, Springer was upset, of course, and frustrated. One comment he made was, "I love my work. It was my life, but I committed a serious indiscretion to my way of thinking, and I guess I must pay for it now dearly." So Springer, to cut a long story short, dabbled in a string of Democratic political involvements that was to see him getting nowhere of any real importance any time soon. And by 1982, Springer chased the Democratic nomination for governor of Ohio. I think we all know how that ended. Springer finished third, and with that his political career was at a standstill. Yes, things were quite steady for Springer for a while, until he began getting into broadcasting. This all started whilst he was an undergraduate at Tulane University, working on WTUL, New Orleans FM, or something of a growing college radio station. He was doing this whilst still acting as mayor of Cincinnati. Before long, Springer was hired as a political reporter and commentator of Cincinnati's NBC affiliate, WLWT, which at the time was the lowest-rated news program going. But despite this, Springer was soon named primary news anchor and managing editor. With this, he and others at WLWT felt he needed a signature catchphrase to close with. So, with some help, a catchphrase that still rolls off his tongue today was formed: take care of yourself and each other. Within a couple of years, he became Cincinnati's #1 news anchor. With his success, Springer went on to obtain 10 local Emmy Awards for his late-night commentaries. Springer stuck with the WLWT as commentator until 1993. He was briefly hired by the Chicago-based NBC station WMAQ-TV to serve as a news commentator, but this wasn't as popular, and after only doing 2 news commentaries, Springer left. Well, it was from here Springer went on to gradually become the man we know him to be. When the Jerry Springer Show was first aired, it was clear that it was developed to copy the format of the successful Phil Donahue Show. They even had Jerry's appearance altered to look similar to Donahue by giving him glasses and a hairstyle to match, obviously trying to cash in on the success of the Donahue Show. I suppose it could be argued it makes sense, as both shows were produced by Multimedia Entertainment. Why not try and double the efforts? So many people may very well recall that when the show first began, it was regarded more of a political-type talk show. Topics at the time of the show's earliest stages were considered to be more serious, and guests and audiences would genuinely participate to look at the wrongs and rights of whatever the topic was. There was even a higher regard for guests, such as political commentator, television host, author, military historian, and Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, an American civil rights activist, minister, and politician Jesse Jackson. I think it's fair to say that if you were to hold a gun to the heads of such people now and demand they reappear on the show, they would probably snatch the gun and blow their own heads off to avoid embarrassment. Yes, in September of '91, much of America, along with other parts of the world, have undoubtedly at some point been subjected to this rubbish. But as mentioned above, the show didn't really go off the rails until early in the year 1994, when a new producer spoke with Springer about revamping the show in order to try and get higher ratings. They turned the program more from being about politics and issues of what could be said to stand for stronger and better morals and values to highlighting trashy, tabloid-styled stories and the likes. More shocking than the show's sudden turn in direction is probably the fact that this did indeed gain the show's high ratings, so therefore fueled the ever-growing transformation of the show towards what we know it as today. Like I said, it says a lot about people, especially considering that by the '98 show, it was just ahead of the ever-popular Oprah Winfrey Show. God knows what was going through people's mind. So what was it that got the American audience so enthralled with Springer at this point? Well, as we know, the show ditched any conversations on anything of any importance, which may be an answer in itself, and went on to replace its topics with such things as adultery, prostitution, and such, which seems to be ever popular, as well as feuds that ran circles around homosexuality, transvestism being another popular topic. All of these, and many more, well, of course it was all played into the stage, seemed to be very scripted and choreographed. At this point it was quite cringeworthy to sit and take it in. God knows I've ranked up a few fair hours myself prior to this video in watching much of Springer from its earlier days till present, and as it pushed on, my God, it was terrible. The coaxing of the guests, as well as the way each and every guest seems to basically say the same thing delivered in the very same way to suit their personality, it was and truly is pathetic television. From the moment that Springer himself makes his way down the stage via the stripper's pole, to the ever-goaded cheering of the dumbfounded audience, there isn't much that doesn't seem scripted from the show at all. different takes and camera angles, you do get a glimpse of the so-called security, enticing the audience and using hand gestures to relay commands, treating them like puppets, really. Throughout the audience, continuously, they just throw their fists into the air, amongst other such things, like women lowering themselves just so they can have some jerry beads, and the sheer fact that there are often hordes of students attending the show and enjoying every minute of it says much about the education they are getting. Back to the show, bolting security, they may as well be looked upon more as actors, and bad actors at that. They seem to struggle separating a pair of 5'0" women, never mind some of the hilarious struggles they ensue between the so-called security and a number of the male guests. It really is laughable, to say the least. But leaving all that aside, it's not even worth the time to talk about. But anyway, back to Springer himself. Yes, he's even declared the show basically as utter rubbish, and even said it's not something he watches, nor would he want to. I suppose, despite cleansing himself of any last ounce of decency left in regards to human relations, these comments are probably what little remain of the once decent Springer, if indeed you could argue there ever was one to begin with behind that smile. I don't think there is much else to be said other than Springer may have wanted to have a shot at a normal life with a hard-working career, but once he got his first black mark against him, it just seemed to go downhill from there. And despite the riches he made from the show as well as other works, all I can say is, if I were to make my mark on society, I certainly wouldn't want to be recognised with any familiarity to that of something such as the bloody Jerry Springer Show. Pile of rubbish. So another video draws to an end. Thanks for watching, as always, and thanks again to those who do subscribe. And until next time, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and of course, as always, a very good night to all.